Welcome everyone to our first look at Automation Empire. Now our goal for today's video is simply to give you a look at the early gameplay because this game has quite the learning curve. I've played a few hours now and there are some things that still are hard for me to figure out and I still have to play around with. The good thing is the game refunds all of your money every time that you decide to delete something, so you don't have to worry about only getting back a portion of your resources. So we'll look at the early gameplay. We'll also take a look at some of the items that you can unlock during research, which will change the gameplay as time goes on. Now, as the name would suggest, this game does share a lot of similarities with games such as Factorio or Satisfactory, but there are some very marked differences that you'll see very early on as we get into the gameplay. Now, one thing that will strike a lot of people is whenever you get into the game, you click on options, you would expect to see some graphical options as well as the sound options, and we have no graphical options in game. We simply have the sound volume, which is for the various special effects in the game, and then the music, which I have turned off for the purposes of recording. There is one option for graphics, but it is a standard Unity option before you get into the game in the launcher. So you're looking at options such as, fantastic or good, great, that kind of thing. But once you get into the game, no graphics options. You have to take care of those in the launcher before the game starts. You also have some key bindings that are available before the game launches. But again, once you get into the game, what you see is what you get. So if we click on play, there are several options for planets. 10 options that are unlocked from the beginning. Now 11 through 14 you can see are grayed out. I will assume one of two things on these. Either they're not available at the time at launch, which is when I'm recording this, or they're simply unlocked as you complete tasks and your goal, as you see on the right hand side of the screen, from the different maps. As we scroll through the different maps or planets, you notice that we have everything from sandy desert type areas to more of an Earth-like environment with some mountain and hill areas. We also have a coastline with some water and other island-type maps. And then we also have snow biomes. So whatever your particular interest is, there should be a map that will work well for you. So for our purposes today, if you take a look on the right-hand side of the screen, we're going to be using the Rocky Hills map since that is the closest to an Earth-like planet that we can start on. We have two options, load colony and new colony. Load colony, of course, would be if you have a prior save for a colony, but in our case, we're going to start a brand new colony today. So we're going to click on new colony, and then we have a very important option to get started. There is no tutorial as of the recording of this video, so it is very important that for your first colony you leave starter mode to on, because as the pop-up message tells you, starter mode provides you with the basics that are pre-built. And we're going to see what those basics are here in just a moment. If you're unfamiliar with the game, starter mode is essential, and I agree. This game has a very steep learning curve, and there is a lot of frustration that I have encountered in my first few hours of playing the game. But again, hopefully in today's video, I can help some of you alleviate some of that early game frustration that I have felt as you get started. All right, so we're going to name our colony. We're just going to name it First Look. And then we're going to click on Start. All right, so just in case you missed it on the previous screen, our mission on Rocky Hills is 30,000 kilogram weight output over a 3-month period. So we're not terribly worried about that right now. That is quite a bit. I'll let you know that up front. 30,000 kilograms is a huge amount, so it should take quite a bit of time in order to accomplish that. So you can zoom in and out using the middle mouse button. I can also hold the middle mouse button down and rotate the camera around among different views. If I come up to either pressing escape or the settings options, we have edge panning, which I have turned off. It's on by default. Camera friction on or off, I've turned it on. Essentially all this does is whenever you move the camera around with friction on, as soon as I remove the button, the WAS or D keys, the camera stops immediately. With the friction off, it continues to float just a little while. The depth of field, tilt shift, I have turned all of that off. We're not going to be doing that. You might want to use that for some screenshots or something, but for our purposes, we're not going to mess with this. You've got a field of view, which you can see we can zoom in and out. And of course, we can do that with the mouse button as well, but we can get a little bit closer with this field of view. And then of course, your sound options as well. All right, so you notice already in the game, we've got some basics that are set up. And those basics are a few different things. First of all, we've got a power source. Now this power source doesn't work based on supplying it with the needed components such as, uranium or water for steam, that kind of thing. Instead, it works off of a capacity. So the number of machines that are actually running off of its connection. There's room for 40 here, and you can see we already have 4 that are on here to begin with. Then we have a drone bay, which each drone bay has room for 4 powered drones. You can see already we just have the one sitting out here. Then we move over, you see a few resource deposits. These are in fact coal. There's no way that I'm aware of to find this out at the very beginning. You have to actually place down a mining rig, and then you can mouse over and see exactly what it is that it's mining. So we have one mining rig, then we have a connector, which is called a transfer tube, and then we have a crate maker. So essentially what's happening here is the mining rig is mining, in this case, coal, which is moving through the transfer tube into the crate maker, which is going to supply crates, which can then be loaded onto these trucks, these delivery trucks, which spawn in over here at the road entry, which was all provided for us at the beginning. If you turn that off for the starter options, then you'll have to place all of these yourself. So we have a road entry, which means that we need a road exit. And the significance here is that once this truck goes through the road exit, we will be paid for this delivery. So each truck right now holds a maximum of 6 crates. And if you watch in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll notice that our money will go up momentarily once this train disappears. There we go. It should come in. And so a little over $7,000 for that particular entry. Now, we do have expenses in this game for each of our equipment. So if we come in under the demand, let's see, where are we at here? There we go, finances. So you can see here is our previous month's revenue as well as our cost. So we have power and taxes. And again, each particular machine has a certain amount of cost. And you can find that cost out as you mouse over some of these things. Like, for example, the drone bay costs you $400 per month, research bay $200 per month, and so on. So things can get quite expensive. So you are encouraged to be as efficient as you possibly can. So right now, we're not delivering very much. We're not doing a whole lot. We've got a little bit of money here, $66,990. So we're going to look to be as efficient as possible. And of course, each time one of these trucks pulls up, we're going to want to get it filled as soon as we possibly can. Now, one thing that's going to help us out is if we pick up another drone. So we can do that by clicking on this first icon, the factory icon. We have drones, drone bays, and research bays in here. So we're going to go ahead and click on a drone, drag him out here somewhere in the world where he can spawn in. And you can see that cost us $4,000. And so right now he doesn't have anywhere to go with this. The loading bay is actually empty right now, so we got to wait for the next truck to show up. In the meantime, I'm going to come into our conveyor system, and for right now, you can see there's a lot of options grayed out that we have to do research to unlock. So we've got a load station and an unload station. Anywhere where we want the drones and then later on the cranes to pick up the crate and move it to a different location, then we want the unload station. Load station would be an input for a machine such as a refinery that we'll see here in just a moment. So we're going to click on unload station. Then we're going to press R to make sure that we have the proper orientation coming out of our crate creator. So now this gives us a little bit more room to spawn in additional crate. And here we go. We've got our next truck that is showing up. This should trigger our drones to then come over and begin loading it. So you've got tons of options with how to play the game. Early on, you're stuck with these drones, which are fairly slow, and you do not want them traveling long distances because of their slow speed. So you're going to want to upgrade over time. And to do that, you've got a few options at the top of the screen. So if we take a look at the padlock icon, we've got research unlocks. We begin with the refinery. This is a factory type and must be placed within a factory. It's going to cost us 20,000 research points. Then we can move over to a step conveyor, which is a huge step up, but it's going to cost us 45,000 research points. And right now we're not generating any because we don't have a research station that is set down. All right, so let's go ahead and use up some of this now $78,000, and let's try to get a little bit more up and running. So we're going to click on the mining rig. It's going to cost us 15,000, and you can see we need to make sure everything is connected to power. Right now it's not really an issue since we're so close to the power source and already have some initial power poles laid down. So now we have our mining rig. It's connected to power, so it's already working. However, we don't have any outputs. So we have a few options with outputs. We could always do the exact same setup as what we've seen here in this initial that we've been given, or we can come back over and use one of these other connections. We've got transfer tubes. This will allow us to use a conveyor network of the carts. We've got a couple of different types of transfer tubes, whether you're looking at a 1x1 area or a 3x1 area, just depending on the space that you need. Now, it's important to note these transfer tubes will not connect with one another. So you're either stuck with 1x1 or 3x1. So what we're going to do now is just simply get the 1 block long, and then we're going to use a container. This will allow the container to start filling up, and then on the end of that, we'll come in and put a crate maker, which you can see it's got 3 inputs, the top, left, and right, and then at the bottom we have the output. So for right now, we're simply going to do this. This is certainly not the most efficient design, but it will certainly serve our purposes for right now. Now, with the unload station, of course, we want this to come on the output. We'll just simply make 2 of these. And you can see initially, the very first one that comes out and the second one that comes out, they're empty, so they disappear. And that is because we don't have a connection here. And that brings up a very important thing to pay attention to. So the first thing we're going to do is pause the game. And this is where the game really helps you out. If we come over to the trash icon, we can delete everything we just placed down with no penalty. You get all of your money back. And that is beautiful because you're going to be doing it a lot in the early game. And then as your technology advances, you're going to be doing a lot so that you can reconfigure things, particularly with factories, which as of now, there is no way to expand or change the size of a factory. Once you lay it down, it's there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in and get another conveyor or a transfer tube. And then we're going to connect that onto our crate maker. Again, we're going to use one of the available. In fact, let's just go ahead and spin this around and we'll face it a different direction just to show that you can face this in any direction you want. The only downside here is the unload station. These do not turn around corners. We can do that with the step conveyor that we'll have to unlock later on, but initially these do not turn around corners. They go straight ahead and that is it. So now you notice it is in red. That's because it is not active. We always need to make sure whenever we place down these load or unload station blocks that we come in and activate them. And we do so by changing the drone priority. Right now it's at off. I'm simply going to leave it at high, And there you can see we have a yellow background, regardless of which one of these we choose for priority. The main thing is we've turned it on. So what this is now going to do is it's going to mean as we are creating the main ore that's coming out into crates, the drones are now triggered to come over, pick this up, and use it to fill the machines. So let's change our angle just a little bit. You can see we still have a little over $40,000 remaining. And now here comes one of the drones over to pick this up. And you can see it's working pretty quickly right now, but if we come back and click on the mining rig, you notice that while we have power connected, we do not have water connected. That is something that you'll need to research, but if you do research that, then you unlock fracking, which is going to increase your extraction speed by 30%. So it's certainly something you're going to want to do later on in the game. All right, let's go ahead and let's actually pick up another drone here. In fact, let's just do 2 more drones. Let's try to get this loading and unloading done as quickly as we possibly can. As the game goes on, you notice how slow these guys are moving. Well, we can come into the beaker icon for research, and you can see we have a lot of upgrades that are done here. These upgrades are to increase the speed or loading capacity of existing technologies. So for example, this first technology increases by 10% the minecart speed. Then we can increase the claw train speed and so on as we move down. Of course, the drone speed increase of 10%, 20, 30, 40, and then finally 50. All of these cost research points. So it's going to be a good idea for us early on to go ahead and set up some of that research. So in order to do that, again, right now we're not worried about efficiency. So what we're going to do before we get to the research bay, let's go ahead and lay down this final mining rig for this particular area. And we're going to go ahead and get it connected. We'll drop down a small container here. Not necessarily something you have to do, but we're going to go ahead and do it just for the fun of doing this. And then I'm simply going to place this out. Let's see. Let's go ahead and spin this around. All right, we're going to place it right over here. So we've got a pretty good distance here. You notice we don't have power. We'll take care of that momentarily. So how are we going to get our ore from point A to point B? Because this research station will work based on any input that we give it for the most part. Certain research requires certain inputs, and you can see here for the space rocket, then we're going to need gold, steel plates, capacitors, and so on. But at the very beginning of the game, it doesn't matter what input we give it for a lot of this early game research. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the transfer tubes. And this one is an output. So we're simply going to drop one of these here. And then we're going to get the input, which is going to bring the ore inside of the research vessel. So these are pretty well lined up. So now what we need to do is lay down some mine track. Make sure we've got it going the proper direction, and we want it to go right underneath the output and the input. There we go. So if we move things around a little bit, you can see that our minecart is going to go right underneath the output here and right underneath the input over here. So let's go ahead and click on the track itself, and you can see we can add a cart. Now each track, closed section of track can have up to 16 carts. Obviously we won't need that many for our purposes today, but already you can see as we zoom in a little bit here that the ore is unloading from the mining rig and then going over to the research vessel. Now this would be a really good time for us to drop down a power pole. So we're simply going to put one there, and you can see it lights up instantly. We'll click on that. Once again, we have power but no water. And the contents 8 of 8, that refers to the ore or any other type of material that we're feeding it. Here you can see the process bar until we get some research points. So there we go. We have 1,130 research points. We cannot claim these, however, until we reach this first marker. Once we are at this marker or beyond, we can claim our research points, and they show up down at the bottom of the screen. So now, after a couple of cycles here, this will give you an idea of how many research points we're getting and how often we're getting them. And that will give you a better idea of how long it's going to take to unlock some of these items. So 20,000, 45,000, 80,000, and so on. So it's certainly going to be in your best interest to operate more than one research station. In fact, I plan on using a setup similar to what I did in Factorio, which is to have a long line of them and simply run the tracks down through the center, and then you'll simply have a circle of research stations. There are many ways of doing it, but that's simply one way that I always enjoyed doing it in Factorio. All right, so things are going pretty good right now. We have probably more drones than we actually need, but so far, so good. We are in good shape. We're making some money. We're at 46,680. But for right now, we're simply selling off this raw ore, which is pretty cheap. We're not making all that much money on each delivery of that. What we'll want to do as time goes on is to expand that and actually get into refineries and then into combiners, which will make ever more complex products, which will be worth even more money. But at this point, before we jump too deep into the game, let's back out a little bit and take a look at our map, because we have resource deposits at various spots. Over here, you see we've got some additional additional spots. Looks like we got 5 areas right here. I see 3 more down here at the bottom. I believe these are iron. These are coal, similar to what we're currently mining over here. We have 3 more. These look to be iron as well. And as we move around again, more coal. This appears to be iron. I believe this is gold. And I believe these are oil, but I'm not quite sure. But you can see there's a lot going on, as well as a lot of open space for us to expand. So I mentioned factories early on. So you notice here at the beginning of the game, we can place minecart paths. We can place some of the basic machinery and tools just out onto the ground. That, however, will not be the case as we move deeper into the game and we start to put things such as the refiner or combiner down. You notice in reading the tooltips here that it must be built in a factory. That's important because factories right now, as of this recording, cannot be changed once they're placed. So let's go ahead and take a look at what kind of research we've got. Okay, we've still got quite a ways to go before we have that done. So this will give us an opportunity. So we now have 3 of these up and going, but this is certainly not the best setup. So what can we do to probably make this a little bit better? This is where we're going to take advantage of the pause function, and we're going to come in and we're going to get rid of all of this, except for the drones. We don't want to get rid of the drones. So this setup served its purpose, but it is certainly not the most effective setup. So what we're going to do now is come in, and first thing we need to do is we're going to get some transfer tubes out here. This is going to allow us to dump straight into the carts. And I'm going to see if I can get by with putting that there. The best way to do is to have all of these in a line. But remember, these transfer tubes don't necessarily come in every increment. And since they do not connect with one another, then sometimes you just have to make some adjustments. So now let's come back into our mine track, and we're going to make sure these run right underneath. And you also need to make sure that the path is straight underneath these. If it's curved in any way, these intakes or outputs will not work. So keep that in mind. Now we need an S section. Let's see, let's rotate that. There we go. That will be perfect. And so now we're going to go ahead and curve this around. And for right now, we're simply going to make this a pretty tight circle, but we're going to make a complete path. Oh, that didn't work out. So we'll go ahead and refund this. And hopefully we can make this happen. Okay, we might have to actually change this up a little bit. So this is some of that frustration that I was telling you about before. So this is too tight of a curve. It will not do it. So what we need to do is simply come back, change it up a little bit, and you'll find yourself doing this quite a bit early in the game as you try to figure out how you want things to be arranged. There we go. Now we have a complete circle. It's not necessary to do a complete circle. If you only have a long strand of this, a single line, then the minecart will simply go back and forth in between these, stopping as it needs to for input or output. I prefer the circle because we can use this area on the other side as well as in the center if we need to for additional machinery. So now we need to add a couple of carts. I'm going to add 3 since we have 3 miners up and working. You can also change the direction that you want these to flow. We may do that here momentarily, but for right now, we're perfectly fine with the way it is. So now we need to put down our crate maker once again. So in order to do that, we're going to need to get an intake. And you notice that I cannot put this down if I'm in a curved section. So I have to be on a straight section. Actually, this guy is in my way right now from placing it there. So we'll go ahead and just move over one, place that there. And then we need our crate maker. All right, now it's telling us we need some power. That's no problem. We'll bring the power poles around like this. That'll get us the power that we need. So this will be a little bit more efficient than what we were dealing with just a moment ago. And we'll bring this out for a total of 4. And then we will come back in to our research bay. And we're just going to put it right over here on the side. We need to leave 1 block of room between the right side of it and the cart path because we need to put our intake transfer tube right there. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of just exactly how this can work. I do actually want this to go the other way. So let's change it to where it goes that way. You can see the research bay grabs the 8 that it needs to get started with its research, and then that will actually last it quite a while. So you'll notice as it continues around, the research bay will only take the material as it needed it. Now we have the 4, but you notice if we pause the game for a second, none of the drones have come over to pick these up. And if you remember from earlier, you can see the red outline. That's because these are off. We have not turned them on yet. So we'll go ahead and do that. And if we turn the time back on, you can see these guys immediately come and get them. So this is a great idea for you to check. If you are early on in the game or even in the middle or late part of the game, and you notice that you have an output where crates are simply sitting there and not being picked up, make sure you've got the station itself turned on. All right. I also noticed we're up to 86,000 right now, which of course is very nice. All right, so as we let this play out a little bit, Now that our next truck has arrived, we're going to have additional room. And that's going to bring me to the next thing that I want to talk to you about. You are not confined to one road entry and one road exit on your map. What I have found is that every time you add a road entry, for example, if we come over to our roads icon, there are entries and exit here. If I decided I wanted to add another entry next to this other one, or anywhere else on the map for that matter, then I need to make sure that I add an accompanying exit to go with it. And that can be useful if you want more flow of trucks than what you're currently getting. So it'll give you the ability to add more loading zones, as you see here, which is called a road pit stop. And this is going to give us the opportunity to not only set the drone priority, but also what resources does it accept. Here early game, we're just leaving it on all. But as we continue moving forward and specialize certain areas in certain resources, we'll want to adjust that. But for right now, no reason to really mess with that. But one thing we can do is we can add another pit stop. Adding an additional pit stop will enable us to get more traffic, more trucks. And so if we have the output to handle it, we can make more money. Now you notice, just as we had with the outputs on the machines, we're red to start off with. So what do we want to do? We're going to make sure it's on all, and then we're going to change the priority to low, medium, or high. Right now we're just keeping everything on high. But what this is going to do is, as you can see already, it's going to bring in another truck. So now that's going to give us the ability, instead of these drones sitting around and waiting and letting this queue fill up, now they have multiple opportunities to continually load and unload. So what that's going to give us the ability to do right now is we're going to start adding some additional machines. Let's first get a transfer tube. We'll drop that right there. Then we'll get a crate maker, make sure that we get it oriented properly. All right, now we need, there we go. Once again, it's red. We need to turn this on, and we'll do just that. All right, so now let's take a look at what happens as we come by each of these. You notice that they are filling in the carts. We're still all good with the research base, so it doesn't do anything. And now we have 2 of these up and running, and it'll take a little time. As I said, I've only been playing this for a couple of hours, about 3, I believe. So there is still tons of work to do to figure out the optimum setup. How many miners do you need versus how many of these package handlers do you need? All sorts of ratios that we still need to figure out. The game is still very, very early in its lifespan, so plenty of time to try to figure that out. But for right now, it does appear as though we could handle at least one more of these. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to grab another intake, drop it over here, and then we'll grab our crate maker, and once again, make sure we have it oriented properly. And then we'll come back over to the conveyor, get our unload station, drop these down, and then immediately come over and activate them. All right, so right now, let's see. This guy, how many? All right, we actually have 2 trucks that are headed out right now. That is awesome, because that's going to give us a nice amount of income. You can see there our monthly cost coming out, $6,300 right there. And then another $6,300 right there. So we're making money, and you can see we have tons and tons of resources that are being made. And it looks like a 1-to-1 ratio with the crate makers and the miners is pretty good right now. Again, keep in mind later on, as we increase the efficiency of our mining rigs and or our crate makers, that ratio may change. But for right now, it looks like we're in pretty good shape with a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, one thing I do notice that we need to do is we need some more drones. The drones we have are no longer enough for what we're trying to accomplish. Later on in the game, we'll have access to the claw mechanisms, the claw train as they're called, and these will be much faster and much more efficient at picking up the boxes and loading them into different areas or onto the truck itself as time goes on. But for right now, we're stuck with these drones, which are pretty slow. So in order to get some more drones, we need to lay down another drone bay. So for right now, I'm simply going to drop it over next to the other one. Power is automatically fed to it. And if you notice at the bottom of the screen, 4 of 8 now. So we have room for 4 more. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Don't necessarily have to get them all at one time, but let's go ahead and see how quickly we can get these resources unloaded. We have 2 trucks that have arrived, and it looks like it's going to take no time at all to get this first one loaded. Same thing with this second one. We'll get the resources loaded very quickly, and there you go. The next one is off. So you can continue adding more of these loading bays, or the pit stops as they're called, all along the road. What you cannot do up to this point is come in and say, well, I want to add another one on the other side of the road. It will not, as of now, allow you to do that. If you wanted to do that, you would need to put another road entry and exit to create another road. Then you could do it. But as of now, you cannot put the pit stops on either side of the road. All right, these guys are getting these trucks loaded very quickly. In fact, we could probably do with a few more drones at this point, just to try to keep up with the capacity we have. And we could attempt to add more of these pit stops down. But if we come back over to our research station, you notice it is glowing green right now. That's because we have met the minimum in order to claim our research point. We've made it to this first blue tick mark. So we have 26,520. I'm actually going to let it finish up this last cycle before we claim it. There we go, 27,540. We'll claim those. They drop down to the bottom of the screen, and we're all set. Now it will continue going as long as there is some sort of product that is being fed into the research station and it has power. Then it will continue to research. And as I mentioned before, you can put down as many of these research stations as you would like. All right, trying to keep an eye out for just sort of the flow of things, making sure this one-to-one setup is working the way we want it to. It looks like we're actually falling behind a little bit on our mining. You notice all 3 of these are empty right now. Next time it comes back around, looks like we're going to be able to fill each one of these up. And yes, okay, so that's perfect. Research station takes a little bit, and then this initial crate maker takes the rest. Okay, so we are falling behind just a little bit on our one-to-one ratio. So it looks like 8 drones will be enough, maybe even too many for this point in the game. So at this point, you notice that we're doing great. We have $93,250. And what I would be looking to do next is expanding. And the most logical place to expand would be right over here in this area, because it's the closest and would enable us to move things over via minecart to our existing. In fact, what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add another pit stop out here. Not that we necessarily need it right now, but before I start laying down power poles, I want to have this in place as we continue to expand. All right, we'll go ahead and turn this on. We'll put it on medium priority right now because we don't want these guys coming down here to load and making that long trip unless they absolutely have to. All right, so if we come back down, Let's go ahead and drop down a couple of more mining rigs. We'll go ahead and do all three at the same time, and you notice there is no power. But if we come back up to our power station, we're only using 14 out of possible 40 connections, so we have plenty of room that is available. So we'll go ahead and simply run more power poles. Let's see, I'm going to try to keep them as close as I can. Now this is where the game will help you out. If I just keep clicking, then the game will take these power poles and extend them as long as it possibly can. All right, there we go. And let's go ahead and run this last one around the back. Now you can see we have power. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing here that we were doing before to start off with. Again, this is all until we unlock the refineries and take the next step in the game. All right, so let's go ahead and let's see how this is going to work. These are all three at different locations, so it's going to be a little tricky to get these up and running. All right, so for these, we'll try to do like this. For this one, I'm not sure how this is going to work out. We'll start off with this setup. And as always, the more of these trucks we see coming through, the more money we're making. So we certainly like that because we're spending quite a bit of money as we expand. All right, so now let's start to lay down some tracks. And this is simply going to be a matter of trial and error. Let's see. Okay, so we can't do that. What if we drop down a container that'll connect right on there? And then, of course, we can put our transfer tube on there. Okay, now we come back to our mine track. And okay, so these first two line up. That is perfect. And then I'm going to grab one of these S tracks. There we go. I like that. Okay, so now where do we want to take these? And right now, we have tons and tons of room. So what I think I want to do is sort of try to mirror this type of setup. And I want to bring this, because the mine carts are much quicker at this than the drones, I'm going to use this. And we're simply going to come up like this. And let's see, we don't want to get too terribly close. That should be enough. We'll leave a little bit of room in the center there so we can drop down some machines. Oh, actually, I did that wrong. Let's come back. Lots and lots of trial and error early on, as you can see. All right, so what I want to do instead is actually bring this out to about, probably right there is far enough. You can see it's not costing us all that much money. Okay, so we'll drop that out and maybe about right there. Yes, that should be perfect. We're going to run it right along the power poles. There we go. Now let's spin around. And again, I'm going to make a complete closed track for this, but that is certainly not something you have to do. I do it because I really like the look of it, and it creates a continuous supply around without having to worry about mine carts not being able to access certain stations and so on. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So once again, we're going to come back. We're going to get our, Let's see. There we go. Let's make sure we got it up where we need it. And yes, that is perfect. We'll go ahead and drop 3 of these down because we've seen that 3 seems to work pretty good. 2 would probably work very well also. All right, let's see. We need to rotate this around. Ooh, and we're going to have just enough money. You can see this took all of the money we had. So we're going to need to wait for our last couple of trucks to be loaded up before we can continue. But for right now, we're doing exactly the same thing as we did over here. We've got research available to be collected. So that brings us up to 50,000. And if you remember, under unlock, we only needed 20,000 to unlock our refinery. So we'll go ahead and unlock that. And that means 45,000 research points are what we need for the step conveyor, which will be next. All right, so right now, let's see. Actually, we could have put these, I believe, on the other side. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. These were not creating anything anyway, so I don't have to really worry about pausing time. So I'm going to go ahead and stagger these with our existing. And you'll see why this can be a pretty good early game setup here in just a moment. So since we've unlocked the refinery, or the refiner as they call it in game, it's going to cost us 10,000 up front and 800 per month. So we're going to need to save up a little bit of money. But right now, yeah, this is going along just fine. We've got 2 more trucks that are headed out of here. So that'll give us the ability to make a little bit more money. But we'll certainly want to get into these refiners because they will take the raw ore that we're currently selling and they will be able to process it into a much more valuable ore and a much more complex product, which will make us more money and allow us to expand even quicker. But right now, what I need to do is make sure that we get these things up and running. Okay, we're good there. Now we need some mine carts. Each mine cart is 2,500. So right now you can see we've just dipped into the negative. We'll let this truck get through there. But this will give you an idea of just how fast you can expand. And most importantly, just how fast. All right. Oh, we didn't quite get enough. We're going to have to wait for this last truck. We had some expenses come out. We have now reached December of year 1. All right, so as soon as this one clears the tunnel, we should hopefully have enough money to buy our first mine cart. Of course, we'll want, we'll go ahead and get 2. And it doesn't really matter which way they're going at this point. Either way will be perfectly fine. But we'll just let this continue on, and we'll zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so we've already got these down. I forgot to turn them on. So there we go. We've already got our first products coming out. And it looks like everything's got power. We're in good shape. So as time goes on, we'll want to get another mine cart. And let's see. Okay, here comes a couple more trucks. The collision in this game I have found is pretty good. You can see here the trucks will not run through each other, but the drones have a pretty nice amount of leeway before they actually run into machines or each other. And for the most part, it's not too bad. So we'll let these 3 trucks get through there and see if we can add one more cart. And now you can see a steady flow of trucks that are running in and out. just about the time we get one truck fully loaded, it is time for the next truck to get parked. All right, so now I'm actually going to start dropping additional ones of these so we can get additional resources. But this would be the time of the game where I'd really want to start looking at how I want to set up my factory. And with the factory, you can see now they are no longer grayed out. So we have the factory, which lays out in a grid system. And then, of course, right now we don't have the money to do this, but you can see just how much it costs, $800 per square. And so something like a 4x4 grid works pretty good early game, but that'll give you an idea as that will allow us to fit probably 4 of the refiners within that area. But keep in mind when laying down the factory that once you lay this down, once it's done, you only have one choice, and that is to demolish the entire thing. So if you get a little bit later in the game and you decide, I really need a bigger factory in this area, you cannot do it without demolishing the entire thing plus any machines that might be inside. So definitely something you want to keep in mind as time goes on. All right, once again, we are running these trucks through here very quickly. And you can see we've got plenty of options, especially as time goes on. We didn't need to go through everything that we have gone through for these purposes, but I wanted to show you a few different ways of doing things. We started off the video by having a few different setups on our mining rigs, and then we finally ended up with a circular path that is hooked up to, right now, just one of the research vessels. You can see, oh, we're right at this thing turning green here just any moment. And all right, I really like the flow of goods right now. You can see it's starting to get backed up, but the main thing is each time a truck pulls up, it is not here any longer than it is necessary for us to load it. So that is going to be awesome as time goes on. All right, we're now up to 33,000, now down to 23,000 after our cost came out. So the last thing I wanted to show you in today's video is setting down the basics for a factory. So what I'm going to try to do is do a 4x4 grid, and we'll just do it right here. Again, you want to keep things fairly tight early on, and you notice that we get walls around this. Right now there's no way in. There are no doors. So we're going to need to drop down some doorways, and I generally like to leave all of these open if at all possible. But for right now, we'll have these open, and that will at least get us somewhere to start. So we still have $31,000. So each refiner is $10,000. So we'll go ahead and drop one of these in. Now these refiners are going to be different than what we're used to. Let's see, let's go ahead and put this. Now we could try to fit 2 of these width-wise, but for our purposes, that's not really necessary. We're just going to drop one in right here for our purposes. Now, we cannot use the standard way of using the pipes, the transfer tubes to get these in. Instead, we have to use these unload and load stations. So we're going to put a load station here on, let's see, which way are we going here? We are going this way. So here is our load station, and we're going to turn it on high priority. And now I'm going to actually turn this to none, and we're going to either load this with coal or iron. Either one of those can be smelted in here. Now we need to set up our conveyor for the unload, and we'll go ahead and extend this. Make sure we turn this on. All right, there we go. And this gives us our very first refinery. Now you can see these guys. The downside of the drones is that every one of them is going to try to drop down a crate here. Only one of them can. The rest of them simply have to turn around and go back. This is also the opportunity that we have to make some changes to what we're selling. Okay, we probably wouldn't want to do it just yet in the game, but what we could do is come down here and turn this to none and say, I only want to make the refined material in here. I don't want to sell the raw ore anymore. I only want to sell either the coal or the iron. So that way, that's all that will be accepted at this particular pit stop. These guys will come over and grab that. Here, if we zoom in a little bit, you can see there's your iron, there's your coal. Both of them work just fine in here. Let's go ahead and flop down another one. Keep in mind the drones cannot move between these if you put them this close together. So make sure you do maybe two and then leave a little space for the drones to move around a little bit quicker. So we'll go ahead and drop that one down while we've got a little bit of money. We'll do the unload station. Go ahead and turn that priority on while I'm thinking about it. Then put a load station. And then we're going to have coal or iron ore, either one. Oops, I forgot to turn it on. And now you can see these guys are going to start using it. Now you notice we didn't have to run any power poles in here, and that's because power attaches to the outside of the factory. If I click somewhere outside the factory here, you can see the power connection on the corner. It'll work on any of the four corners. And you also notice that it got a lot quieter here. So if you are a little bit annoyed by the sound, simply click off the factory. It will continue to do its work, but you won't see or hear it. So for our purposes, I'm going to click on it once again. And actually, I'm going to put down a couple more doorways to let these guys in and out. And you can see we've still got a little bit more room for probably two more in here. And if we wanted to change the orientation, we could probably fit a total of about 6 in this space using this type of a setup. So not bad at all. So as time goes on, you see we got 25,000. And I want to go ahead and put down another one. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a space there. So unload. Make sure we turn this on. Then we come back into the load. And again, we could extend the load on this side just as we did with the unload, but for our purposes, that's not really necessary right now. Our inputs are going to be either coal or iron, which are the two things we are supplying right now. And as you get more of these set up, once you get 3 or 4 of these set up, it might be a good idea to turn off the sale of the ore and only sell the refined goods. And I also noticed that we could use some more drones at this point. We are running low. Again, this is only early game. Later on in the game, you're going to want to get into the cranes, which are much faster and can cover long distances very quickly. But for right now, these drones will suffice and take care of the task at hand. All right, so right now I'm actually going to change this to only sell those items. We'll change all 3 of these to do that very thing. Let's make all of them high priority. But you can see that already we have a little bit of a distance that these guys are having to travel. So something for you to keep in mind as you continue to work forward in planning for your factory. Now, last thing, I had mentioned earlier that you cannot resize. As of now, you cannot resize the factory. You only have the option to demolish it, which will get rid of all the machines that are inside here as well. So again, keep that in mind. You can either save up a lot of money and try to build a huge area for a factory early on, or you can try to compartmentalize by building several smaller factories and specialize each one of them. For example, we could specialize this area in coal production and then come over here and do iron production and so forth. So that'll get you started early game. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I will do my very best to answer the questions based on the knowledge that I've gained so far. Thank you very much for joining me, and stay tuned for more.